Feisty, fearless, and fair. She's an Emmy-winning journalist from the White House to war zones, telling all sides of the story. This is the Rita Cosby Show.
Lovely Rita, meet a maid. Nothing can come between us. When it gets dark, I tow your heart away.
Breaking news.
And tonight on the Rita Cosby Show, some big news. First off, just a little bit ago, President Trump has moved to get his New York convictions thrown out based on the decision today by the U.S. Supreme Court because it may be far-reaching. We're going to talk about that later on in the show. This also comes on another big news night where President Biden addressed the nation and came out with his statements about the U.S. Supreme Court. Now, let's put it in some context. When the decision came down from the New York court, everybody, and of course, Republicans and the president were not happy by that decision by a state court, remember? And Alvin Bragg and all of that stuff, which was clearly politically motivated and politically charged. Well, President Biden at that point blasted that comment and said, how could they criticize the courts? How could they be overreaching? How could they do this? You have to respect the rule of law. Nobody's above the law. You have to respect the courts. Well, guess what? President Biden did just a little bit ago. He came out swinging, and I think he did something utterly dangerous and utterly despicable. President Biden, the president of the United States, came out and was very critical of the U.S. Supreme Court, totally politicizing, saying that its decision today was disgraceful, essentially, saying that it has become a, quote, MAGA court. That was the message coming from many Democrats today, and saying that they are undermining now the rule of law in this country. To me, this just shows that President Biden is so desperate and knows after his disastrous debate performance last week that he is willing to go after anything and everything, including something that is supposed to be a co-equal branch of government, which is the U.S. Supreme Court. It's the highest court in the land. You are supposed to say separate but equal. Remember? What about all of that? And yet tonight, the president of the United States did a very dangerous thing because guess what? He is now attacking the validity of the Supreme Court, attacking the justices on the Supreme Court, and also questioning, saying that they are highly politically charged. And their decision today, he believes, also shows that President Trump has free reign to do whatever he wants, that he can be a dictator in chief. He obviously didn't read the Supreme Court decision, which we're going to get to in a moment. But first, listen to what President Biden said. Here it is on the Rita Cosby Show. Here's President Biden just a little bit ago addressing the country about the Supreme Court decision on presidential immunity. And he came out swinging.
This nation was founded on the principle that there are no kings in America. Each of us is equal before the law. No one is above the law, not even the President of the United States. With today's Supreme Court decision on presidential immunity, that fundamentally changed. For all practical purposes, today's decision almost certainly means that there are virtually no limits on what a president can do. This is a fundamentally new principle, and it's a dangerous precedent, because the power of the office will no longer be constrained by the law, even including the Supreme Court of the United States. The only limits will be self-imposed by the president alone.
I contend he's probably one of the luckiest guys of this decision. You could make the case that people would go after him for defying the immigration laws in this country. What about protecting the homeland? Our border is wide open. That is ripe for a major, major lawsuit. He's actually one of the lucky recipients of this decision because today's decision by the U.S. Supreme Court says that presidents are covered by presidential immunity if they are acting in the office of official capacity. In other words, if you're acting as president and it's presidential duties, or it could be presumed to be, then it should be covered. Guess what? You could make the case, even though President Biden is doing a really lousy job at the border, I'd give him a -F. He is still, quote, acting as the president as he should be, carrying out or not carrying out the law. That is in his, quote, official capacity, even though it is dismal and pathetic and downright dangerous. He would have 1 million lawsuits if suddenly they said, no, a president could be sued. And then you could go back and maybe do things on Obama. How far back do you go? I mean, do you hold like maybe a family member if the president has passed away? I mean, I'm being facetious, but honestly, it opens an enormous Pandora's box. And here's a little more of President Biden tonight, because he said this is so dangerous because Trump is the guy who is defying the law. Meanwhile, they're the ones who are upset when the law doesn't work in their favor. You know, I mean, talk about the hypocrisy tonight. It is so rife. And he's saying, oh, we got to get rid of, you could tell he's totally using this now as a political punching bag coming, remember, after some of the justices. Remember, there was that assassin who showed up at the house of Supreme Court Justice Brett Kavanaugh. That was like a year or two ago. It's dangerous. You don't go after the Supreme Court. How about also Schumer? Remember when he said, Kavanaugh, you're going to hear us. Gorsuch, you're going to hear us. Remember him screaming from the Supreme Court steps? And now you have the president of the United States, who is clearly, again, so concerned about his own poll numbers and about his downright pathetic appearance at the debate, that he's willing to do anything. And now he's riding politics saying, you got to elect us so we can pack the court with people that we like because we don't like the decision. I mean, that is ridiculous. On some of the last decisions, by the way, I think it was the January 6th case, guys, if I remember correctly, I think Ketanji Brown Jackson voted in favor, which was interesting. And it was actually Amy Coney Barrett who voted the other way. I believe it was that case. It was one last week. So they're not always, quote, political. They should never be political. They're voting on what they believe is the Constitution. And you are always supposed to respect. You don't go after the high court, the highest court in the land, the Supreme Court justices. It shows that there are no limits to these people. And it also shows that if Joe Biden gets elected, the first thing he's going to do is try to pack the Supreme Court, try to add more justices. There's been this effort to say there shouldn't just be 9 justices. There should be, 20 justices and the rest of them all Democrats? That's what they're going to try to do. They're going to try to make Puerto Rico and also Washington, D.C. official states. That's what they've talked about. So what? Then they can get more electoral votes? You see where this is all going, you guys? Who is a threat to democracy? 1-800-848-9222, 1-800-848-9222. And you are listening to The Rita Cosby Show. Here is Joe Biden, again, the president of the United States, saying, oh boy, Trump is a real threat to democracy because the U.S. Supreme Court decided that, guess what? Presidents have some protection from prosecution, rogue prosecutions. But Joe Biden doesn't see it that way. Listen to this.
So now the American people have to do what the courts should have been willing to do, but will not. The American people have to render a judgment about Donald Trump's behavior. The American people must decide whether Donald Trump's assault on our democracy on January 6th makes him unfit for public office in the highest office in the land. The American people must decide if Trump's embrace of violence to preserve his power is acceptable. Perhaps most importantly, the American people must decide if they want to entrust the president once again, the presidency, to Donald Trump, now knowing he'll be even more emboldened to do whatever he pleases whenever he wants to do it.
I guess President Biden is supposed to have no constraints, right? It's okay if he can do whatever he wants, like somewhat pull in and persecute and bring in people such as Matthew Colangelo and inspire fellow Democrats to go after President Trump. when they happen to turn a blind eye to repeat offenders committing violent crimes. But that's not weaponizing the justice system. But today, when the Supreme Court decides that presidents have official acts and can be protected, can you imagine how disastrous it would have been if the U.S. Supreme Court came out today and said that a president could always be prosecuted? They didn't give a blanket, allowance for it. They said if it's not an official act, and of course, all of that's going to be litigated. Well, if it's not an official act, again, maybe then they can be prosecuted, they're saying. But if it is an official act or presumed to be in an official act, give the deference to the president because it is the president of the United States. Well, then it should be covered. How could you be more clear? I actually think a very fair decision. And it helps every single president. This is not a decision for Trump. It is, but it's obviously a decision for past presidents and future presidents. And if I was Joe Biden, I'd be thanking my lucky stars because there's a number of things that people are talking about that he could be qualified for, So, but yet, no. He wants to go after President Trump again as he's the threat to democracy because I guess democracy is only as Joe Biden sees fit. Well, earlier today on Katz and Cosby, we spoke with John Lauro. He is the attorney for President Trump, and he is the co-counsel on the January 6th case. And this is his reaction to the Supreme Court ruling.
What an incredible decision by the Supreme Court. Just an amazing decision. And a victory not just for President Trump, but for the American people and the American presidency. And more importantly, we had a very, very skilled decision by Justice Roberts, where he basically said, listen, we're not going to have a system of government where one administration gets to politicize and weaponize the criminal justice system to go after a political opponent. That's just not going to happen. And with respect to activities that a president takes that are constitutionally required, absolute immunity, which is what President Trump has been saying all along. And then as to another bundle of official acts that a president takes in connection with being president, presumed immunity. So it was just an outstanding decision. But most importantly, it protects the presidency and it protects the American people.
Absolutely. And that's why this was monumental today. Monumental. And we all know what this is about. We know what it's about. You could just hear like, oh, shoot, we can't do another trial against him before November. After Joe's dismal debate performance, we got to take Trump off the campaign trail because he looked presidential. He did a great job at the debate, and our guy did a lousy job. That's what Democrats are saying. They're saying, oh, boy, what can we do to keep him off oh, God, maybe if that other case can hurry up and come up. Well, guess what happened today? Because of this Supreme Court, and because now they'll litigate what was an official act and what was not an official act, that if it's official, it's covered or presumed to be covered if it's borderline. But if it's an unofficial, then there'll be litigation. Let's go over what's official, what's not, all that stuff. And that means that there'll be a lot more legal wrangling. And that means that the January 6th case will probably not be litigated, won't go to trial before the election. And Joe is so upset about that. Listen, here is John Lauro, again, the attorney for Trump, on the real reason that the Democrats are crying tonight.
There's so much to do now with respect to this case. I think it's going to take months, if not more than a year, to sort it out, because the court below is going to have to deal with official versus unofficial acts. The loser of any decision in the court below gets to appeal to the D.C. Circuit. I think we're looking at, a stream of litigation lasting many, many months. And in my judgment, I don't see how it can be completed before November.
I don't see any way it can be completed until November is what most legal experts are saying. And that's the bottom line, because boy, would they have loved to bring up January 6th one more time, because Joe Biden did such a lousy job of bringing it up during the debate. And Trump came back and had answers for all the questions, and they didn't like it. And now they're trying to figure out, boy, do we keep Joe or get rid of Joe? 1-800-848-9222. 1-800-848-9222. I'll take your calls when we come back.
The Rita Cosby Show.
Economists warn that massive tax hikes could devastate your IRA and 401k as the stock market braces for impact. I'm Larry Kudlow, and I urge you to fortify your savings with physical gold with my friends at Priority Gold. To learn how gold and silver can help diversify your savings, please call 1-800-405-GOLD or just visit PriorityGold.com to get a free gold information guide. That's 1-800-405-GOLD.
Get the most out of your summer. Take advantage of Invite Health's Independence Day sale. Buy any Invite Health product at suggested retail and get the second bottle free. Call us now to order by phone at 800-463-7575. That's 800-463-7575. Get your BOGO on Beauty Collagen Gummies today for healthy summertime skin. Mention WABC when you call 800-463-7575. That's 800-463-7575.
Janine Pirro here for Colonial Metals Group. Colonial Metals Group helps Americans protect their future with the most trusted store of wealth in human history, physical gold and silver. If you're retiring or retired, go to colonialmetalsgroup.com/Pirro for your free Janine Pirro Colonial Metals Group Retirement Protection Kit, or call 800-965-8004. 800-965-8004 now to receive a free home safe and up to $7,500 in free silver.
It's the Rita Cosby Show.
Well, that is what Biden is saying tonight, is that Trump is dangerous. Yet, if you look at the weaponization by the Biden team, and I'm talking about even Matthew Colangelo, who was working with Bragg's office, and you look at all these cases that they've been throwing out at Trump, and Jack Smith got slapped down again by the U.S. Supreme Court. And I guess if that happens, if the rule of law is not on your side, then they must be political. That's the message from Joe Biden. What I saw tonight, that even scares me even more about Joe Biden. In other words, you got to elect me because I'm fair. I know the truth. And Trump is dark, and anybody who supports him is dark. It just shows they are going to pull out every single stop. God forbid Joe Biden lose. Then it's got to be a threat to democracy. It's Joe Biden or democracy is about to collapse. Did you see democracy collapse when Joe Biden was not in the White House? I don't remember that. I must have missed that one. 1-800-848-9222. Let's go to Alex in Brooklyn. Alex, can you believe what Joe Biden said a little bit ago?
I could believe anything that guy says. He has no low, or he doesn't have anything that he's not going to say for political gain. He's the biggest phony, baloney, corrupt politician our country has ever seen. But I think this Supreme Court, they're the greatest set of judges our country's ever seen. They voted for mifepristone, which was politically incorrect for them to do, as well as I think 2 weeks ago, that domestic violence abusers, you should be able to take away the guns from them. That's not something that Republicans are for. And so they're not political judges. But over here, Joe Biden is being saved by those judges. And I got mixed feelings about this because now if you look at the media, they're talking about Donald Trump's going to take out his political enemies with the Navy. Joe Biden killed American people for political purpose. He opened the border.
You know what you brought up? That's why I'm saying Joe Biden should be going, woo, because there's a lot of things you could go after Joe Biden for. And he just got a little covered today. But no, he's talking Trump.
Rita Cosby is on. The Rita Cosby Show presents Back the Blue.
And this Back the Blue segment is sponsored by GoyaCares.com, because you are a precious gift from God. And this is a very powerful story coming from Cincinnati, Ohio, where a retired police sergeant on vacation with family rescues a couple from a sinking car. A retired Cincinnati police sergeant and his family saved an Ohio couple who just happened to be vacationing in the same area in Florida. Now, the Ramsey family's from Ohio, while the Bell family lives in northern Kentucky. And up until June 11th, the two families had no idea they lived so close to one another. Some might call it a coincidence. Others might say it's luck, but these two families really call it a miracle. Well, one day, several streets were flooded after the area received more than 11 inches of rain. And you couldn't see anything, apparently, Dean Ramsey explains. And with several cars stalled on the road, the couple said they tried to pull off what they thought was land. The water sucked us right into the lagoon, and that was it. Watching it in horror from their condo was retired Cincinnati Police Department Sergeant Mike Bell, his wife Ginger Bell, and their 3 young kids. And the Bell family responded. We were able to stop, slow things down, and assess and make decisions on how we were going to move forward. They said that they remembered they needed to know the address, so that's the first thing they told her. Then they said to the dispatcher that the car is in the pond and there were 2 people in there. Meanwhile, the retired sergeant and his wife, who, by the way, is also an emergency medical doctor, decided to take action because they knew that seconds counted. They went over to the edge of the water. They realized that the car wasn't sinking right away, but they said they had a few minutes and that was the most. So they had to hurry up. Mike Bell recounted that moment. At that time, Ginger exited from the front door next to the palm, and she said, we need some flotation devices. And that's where little Hank Bell came in. He said, I needed some help. So he went up to the elevator and he found some of the flotation devices. The Bell kids handed them over to their parents who are already in the water. Talk about a family routine. And they were able to save the Ramsey family. The whole rescue took about 5 minutes. And back on dry land, the Ramsey family saw their rescuers and said they were guardian angels. The families say that they have plans now to reunite in the near future. And of course, bravo, bravo, bravo to the Bell family. And of course, the retired police sergeant and also his wife. How incredible is that, that she was an emergency medical doctor, and the 2 kids who obviously had good training too. And what a beautiful story of a retired Cincinnati police sergeant and his family all jumping into action to save those in need. Well, we are talking about, of course, the story of the day. It's the immunity decision on presidential immunity coming from the U.S. Supreme Court. Big news, and big news for President Trump because it could impact many of his decisions. Here's Alina Habba, Trump attorney, and this was her reaction to this historic decision, which doesn't just cover President Trump, but potentially all presidents in the future. Take a listen.
It was a good decision. Obviously, I believe absolute immunity should exist for the executive branch, but they did recognize it. And the presumptive immunity now will then get outlined, kicked back down to the courts, and they will look at it. But the presumption that any president, and President Trump was acting within the perimeter, the outer perimeter of his official acts, is clear through this decision from what I've read so far. Obviously, I'll examine it and speak about it further on the network, but I think that this was a very good decision for us.
It was a huge and enormous decision for the Trump team. And it's also an enormous decision for other presidents. The right thing to do. Can you imagine if presidents in the future have to worry, oh gosh, am I going to be indicted potentially like Joe Biden's been doing to Trump? If they're doing something that they believe is in their official capacity. And by the way, if they step out of line, then you go for impeachment. That's what Congress is for. And that's what the court said today. It's not like it's absolute that there are checks and balances on a presidency. I mean, you could make the case. You could go after Joe Biden for the border on impeachment. I've always said that. You know, I'm not a big snap impeachment person, but I am a big protect the homeland person. But today, if you listen to some of the Democratic pundits, oh my God, they were having conniptions. They were going crazy. They were like, oh my goodness. They couldn't believe that the high court would actually allow anything that Donald Trump did to be within the law. These people have just such orange man bad syndrome. It's horrible. They can't even see the forest for the trees. They're just so obsessed. And here is Van Jones, CNN political pundit, obviously a big Biden supporter. And listen to the way he described the ruling. And boy, he went after the Supreme Court, too.
It makes the Supreme Court look very partisan. They're supposed to be wearing these kind of black and white umpire jerseys or whatever. They look like they're wearing red jerseys or even MAGA hats. It's going to go down bad politically for the Supreme Court. It's also scary because what is Trump going to do? If Trump gets elected and there's this idea that he can get away with even more stuff, that's really, really scary for the public because he already ran over every norm that he could. So it seems like, I'm just looking at this politically, not legally, politically, it's almost like a license to thug in a way. Like, you can do whatever you want, and the Supreme Court is probably going to let you get away with it. That is very frightening in this case. And so I'm very, very concerned.
A license to thug. I have heard it all. Coming from the Democratic Party, which has gone after President Trump every which way but loose. I'd call that a license to thug. You know, they should be revoking that license, not the other. I mean, this is crazy. And so today, Chuck Schumer comes out, of course, Senate Majority Leader. He calls it a sad day for America, a sad day for the rule of law, and he calls it a MAGA court. Also, Senator Richard Blumenthal, Democrat, also said that the Supreme Court basically are, quote, political hacks in robes. That is shocking to hear from a sitting U.S. Senator, both of them. And then Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez goes one step further. She tweets out saying that these decisions by the Supreme Court, this one today, basically is an impetus for her. As soon as they come back, she is planning on introducing articles of impeachment against the U.S. Supreme Court, that these people should be impeached. Joe Biden's great. Don't worry about the millions upon millions of dollars coming to Hunter and other family members. Don't worry about the fact that Joe Biden was out there saying, oh, no, my son never took money from the Chinese, and he did, and he knew it. Don't worry about him saying, oh, look, the intel people say it's Russian disinformation when they all knew it wasn't. There's a lot of stuff there, but it's Trump. Clearly, that is the threat to democracy. And now it's the U.S. Supreme Court, because God forbid they do anything favorable, anything that would help Trump before November's election. This to me is really disgusting. We have crossed a whole new line of political warfare that goes so far beyond Democratic or Republican parties. It really is. The fact that they would go after their leading opponent, as they have gone after President Trump, every which way but loose. And then any sort of decision, even if it's a mixed bag. Today was a kind of a mixed bag because they didn't say everything. They didn't say it's an absolute power. They said if you do something that's, quote, considered an unofficial act, that's not a personal act, in other words, not an official presidential act, that you could be prosecuted for, and that should be looked into. So there's going to be all these appeals left and right. And you know the way the legal system is, that means that it's going to take some time. And that's what they don't want. They don't want time because they want maybe another 500 charges against Trump before Election Day. Because the 34-count felony bogus indictment out of New York was not enough. To me, who is the threat to democracy here? Give me a break. 1-800-848-9222. 1-800-848-9222. Let's go to Larry in Brooklyn. Larry, your reaction to the stunning comments that just came down from Joe Biden a little bit ago. Outrageous. Your thoughts?
Yes, I listened to his speech, and I was extremely antagonized by that speech. I was outraged to the point that I almost busted a gut. I'll tell you, because, first of all, there's no difference between criticizing a pillar of the structure of government, such as the Supreme Court, and criticizing a process of government, such as an election. In my view, it's worse to criticize the Supreme Court. And I think that when he was encouraging the American people to dissent just the way Judge Sotomayor dissented, okay, and the other two justices, followed in line. The ideological dead weight of the court followed in line. So the point is, he was subtly, just the way he accused Trump of encouraging an insurrection, he was subtly encouraging a revolution more than an insurrection. He was saying the American public should dissent. That he stopped just short of encouraging violence. What does it mean for the American people to dissent? To protest the way the Hamas protesters have protested violently?
Larry, you bring up a very interesting point here, because you're right. He's encouraging essentially, let's get rid of this branch of government. And yet he's accusing Trump of doing that on January 6th. Whereas it's directly in his voice criticizing the U.S. Supreme Court, which is supposed to be, again, separate but equal branch of government. And the decision wasn't like, God, Trump walks on water. It was, here's how we separate it. It needed to be done. And the whole reason, by the way, Larry, that the case even came to the Supreme Court is because Biden's DOJ has overreached so much against President Trump. That's the whole reason that they had to put some checks and balances and set some standards, because they're seeing these rogue prosecutors. So it's like he created the problem, and then he's upset that he can't keep getting away with the problem. That's how I take it. And you bring up a very interesting point, Larry, that you're right. He's kind of like inspiring people to get rid of the U.S. Supreme Court, or at least diminish the justices that are there. Can you imagine? It's like, I don't like the Supreme Court. I'm just going to bring in 10 more justices that are all my friends and that are going to only vote my way. And now it's going to be fair. That's really what he's saying. And that is frightening. And you know what? It comes after there have been threats against the justices. That's why I brought it up. You think about when that crazy guy showed up outside of Brett Kavanaugh's home. He was like, remember, he had weapons on him, and he told the Secret Service, I'm going in to get Brett Kavanaugh. That's really scary. So the wrong person hears something like that. How is, I don't agree that someone's words always translate to this, but I mean, that's a dangerous thing to be saying at a time where Americans are already so emotional and so passionate about everything. And the hypocrisy of it coming from Joe Biden after what he's accusing Trump of, to me, is so blatant. So blatant. Larry, thank you very, very much. Let's go to Tony in Clifton. Tony, your thoughts.
Larry, I'm 100% with him. Here's what's happening. Since the Bidens got in, we've seen how our presidency has deteriorated, the one in and the one who, President Trump before him. There's a systematic attack on, just making our leaders, our government. So it's been the executive branch. Now we're going to the Supreme Court. And if you remember, Rita, at the State of the Union, he went after the Supreme Court again and stared them down and said, women are going to not appreciate what you did overturning Roe versus Wade. This is a very scary turn that our country is taking. I'm not saying that no president has ever challenged the Supreme Court. What I'm saying is that for a president who has done so much to undermine one man who's running against him, you have to wonder what other things he's capable of doing. And we're seeing them. He has an open border. He's just ruined our country. And so to look at how he's ruining the system of government that our founding fathers put in is really a disgrace.
It is. And from a guy who claims that, he's the one who's going to set the world straight from evil Trump. I mean, that's the irony of it all. It's like he's doing what he's accusing Trump of doing. Don't you think, Tony?
Right. The other thing is the biggest injustice that has happened in this country, And I'm going to tell you something I've never said. People who voted for Biden, and I did, God help me. You know who they're getting?
Tony, wait a minute. You voted, Tony, hang on a second. You've been calling here a long time. It's the first time I've heard you say that. You voted for Biden?
Yes, I did, Rita.
You did? Wow. Because you know what? It's interesting because you have obviously changed because I know you've called into the show and I always love your calls, Tony. I'm actually surprised. So when did you change? When did you flip? Because this is the first time you've said that. When did you change?
So during COVID, I went through retirement in 2018, and I wasn't very happy with President Trump and the whole COVID lockdown. And, going through retirement, it just really made me want to look for something different. No political background on Joe Biden and what he was and the man. No connection to anything. I watch CNN all the time. So when I tell you that I've gone through a change, and here's what I want to tell you, all the lies that were suppressed on the voting, we never knew about the laptop. And I would have never voted for him had something come out to alert me.
Wow. Wow. Tony, that's a really powerful point because a lot of people have said that. And, when they saw Joe Biden and he said, what laptop? What problem? That's not true. That's not this. And of course, he knew it was accurate. So did the FBI, as it turns out. There's a lot of people who need to do some splaining. But a lot of people came out afterwards in polls and said, had I known that laptop was real, that Hunter was, all these big money deals and all these questionable things, and that Joe was not telling the truth, they would have voted differently. And I do believe it's impacted the election. I do. And look, you're proof of it. It impacted your thinking. Wow, wow, wow. Tony, wow. It's really great to get your perspective. I always love you calling in. And it's interesting to hear what you just said. I think that's such a powerful comment. I think there are a lot of people across America that went through the same thing you went through. Thank you so much, Tony. 1-800-848-9222. And we'll take your calls, everybody, after the break.
It's the Rita Cosby Show. This is the Rita Cosby Show.
Hanging tough. New Kids on the Block. And that is what President Trump is doing through it all. Joe Biden, you can make the case, is trying to still hang in there. We're going to talk about that in the next hour. He's hanging by a thread, but he is hanging in there, despite calls ramping up on the Democratic side for him to drop out. But apparently Jill and Hunter want him to stay in so he could pardon Hunter. I think that's what some of that's about. 1-800-848-9222. Let's go to Phil, line 4. Phil, your thoughts about the Supreme Court decision. It's a biggie, and Biden's reaction tonight, Phil.
His reaction is more like a wounded animal, if you ask me. The audacity that this man has to go after a court that has been around ostensibly for over 200 years and is mentioned in the Constitution as an ultimate authority on law in this country.
By the way, that's longer than Biden's been around, right?
Maybe maybe not. But the shame, the disgrace, and him and Schumer, with Schumer's remarks threatening the justices. I mean, what has this country come to when you've got politicians, career politicians who know better, and they just slam the other divisions of the government as oh well, they're protecting Trump. They're not protecting anybody, because if anybody's going to need protection, guaranteed it's people like Schumer and Joe Biden.
Well, and the irony of it all also is, Phil, is that they're claiming that Trump is the threat to democracy, but what they're doing is such an assault, I think, to the Constitution and to the branches of government. I mean, that's the irony. It's like, talk about the hypocrisy tonight. And here's Joe Biden. It comes again in the context of where he clearly is, as you talked about, a wounded animal. He's on his last leg. I mean, you could see at his debate, he was abysmal. They're desperate. He knows the calls for him to resign are stepping up fast and furious. And so he's willing to take out the Supreme Court in the process.
Janine Pirro here for Colonial Metals Group. Colonial Metals Group helps Americans protect their future with the most trusted store of wealth in human history, physical gold and silver. If you're retiring or retired, go to colonialmetalsgroup.com/Pirro for your free Janine Pirro Colonial Metals Group Retirement Protection Kit, or call 800-965-8004. 800-965-8004 now to receive a free home safe and up to $7,500 in free silver.